Doug, great to have you here today. The return to service timeline, would you expect, given the additional details we seem to be getting on a daily basis here, would you expect that to push out? And if so, what does that mean for production at Boeing?
Well, I think we have to, look to the FAA, which is the, safety organization that's overseeing this. And they're the ones that are going to make the decision as to when the MAX returns to service. I'm not sure we can predict when that will be. I think we can have confidence in the FAA and that their new administrator is a, experienced, seasoned veteran who was a 737 pilot himself, who oversaw, safety and operations at Delta, oversaw crew training. And I think the FAA is doing a very, diligent and detailed, review of the plane, particularly the software system. And at the appropriate time, when they're ready, they'll find the airplane to be safe and allow it to be returned to service.
Doug, there's been a lot of focus on the timeline, or I guess the extended timeline for some of the details and some of the information we've been getting, including those instant messages that were released late last week. This idea of why did it take so long for this information to make its way to the FAA and become public in general. I wonder what you think about that, given the fact that you have this criminal investigation going on, civil investigation, and you have all of these regulators, and not just the FAA, but regulators from around the globe involved. Does it make sense to you to see these, I guess, sort of delayed drips and drabs of information here?
Well, look, I think it's an imperative that Boeing be transparent with the regulators, with the congressional oversight committees. I think let's wait till the facts come out as to why this particular set of emails came out when they did. I'm not sure we know enough yet to draw conclusions. I think, the commitment at the top of Boeing is to be transparent and it is to be forthcoming. And I think, in these kind of circumstances, you don't always get the full version of the facts when things break. And I think we should be a little patient and just allow the regulators and the like to, interview this pilot, to find or the check pilot, find out why the emails came out when they did, and take those facts once they know them into account in their decision-making process.
Doug, let's try to spin it ahead to after return to service actually happen, whenever that is. How much harder did it just get to convince consumers this plane will be safe to fly? And how would you try to market it once it got back into rotation?
Well, I think when the MAX returns, I think one thing that consumers can take comfort in is that it probably will be the most heavily inspected, airline, ever. And I think, there'll have been no stone unturned left by the FAA, and I think that consumers can take comfort in that. I think we should also just not lose sight of the perspective that, overall aviation today remains the safest form of transportation. The two instances where there were crashes with the MAX, I think, were unique. I think they, as we've gotten more into the details, they involved pilots and crew that clearly had, less experience than, say, what a U.S. airline would clearly have. And I think consumers can take comfort in that. I leave it to Boeing as to how best to market the airplane going forward. I think it'll have, an airline customer base that will want to take delivery of the airplane. Demand continues to be robust. This disruption has, had a negative impact in terms of the amount of capacity that can be offered to meet that demand. And I think once the airplane gets cleared, and it will, I think it's just a matter of time, airlines will clearly want to then, receive the deliveries that they have ordered and that have been holding them back in terms of the capacity that they can offer to meet the demand that's outstanding.
Even beyond Boeing and the 737 MAX aircraft specifically, do you think that the certification process at the FAA is now going to change?
Well, I think that is a fair. I think there's 2 points here. One, I think it's always appropriate when you have, instances like this to re-examine the process and to see if it can be improved, see if it can be made better. I think part of the challenge will be, were there to be changes made and were there to be more authority placed in the FAA, it will then need to be in a position where it can significantly increase, its staffing levels and be in a position to hire, world-class aeronautical engineers. And I think part of the arrangement today is a reflection of the challenges that the FAA faces in that regard. I think
Doug, there's so many.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think a second issue is, historically the rest of the world has looked to the FAA's certification of a Boeing airplane as basically being sufficient for that organization then to accept that certification. And I think it would be unfortunate if we had sort of a balkanization of the certification process where you had, sort of many voices involved that perhaps could be discordant and have different opinions, and how you create a single aircraft in that process, I think, is something that both Boeing and Airbus are concerned about. Developing a new airplane, which I think is in everybody's interest, is hard enough today. It's almost a bet the company type of decision. And I think we don't want to make it so it becomes so difficult that the two large aircraft manufacturers, become more reluctant to invest their capital and take the risks that bringing on brand new technology and a brand new airplane involves.